snatch up the seeds and eat them, and there was no chance for anything to grow there. Then the stony ground was very common in Palestine. It'd be a lot like around here when you try to dig a hole in your backyard or a fence post and all you encounter is rock and caliche. In Palestine, the stony ground was every place. As a matter of fact, most of Palestine was just a very thin layer of topsoil. Might only be a couple of inches thick. And underneath that was limestone, just rock. And so if you cast seed or if seed got blown into that kind of ground, it would take root. It would grow because there's topsoil. But just a couple inches down, you run into rock. So those seeds would begin to grow and start to grow real good, and then all of a sudden, boom, they would get scorched by the sun and die because they couldn't get their roots down far enough to establish themselves or to germinate and get any kind of nourishment or water. Then you have thorny ground. Now this was very deceptive ground because it would look clean, it would look fertile, it would look fine. But once you seeded it and got some water on it, all of a sudden these choking grasses and weeds would come up out of the ground every place, and they would grow so fast and quickly that they choke out the thing you were trying to grow. So you had these choking grasses to deal with. So good seed and dormant weed seed would grow together, and in the end the weeds won, the good plants were killed off, and the weeds survived. I got the same problem in my backyard, trying to keep a nice lawn, and all I've got are these broadleaf weeds, you know, the chickweed and so on, and it's just a nightmare to try and get rid of the stuff and still be able to grow your grass. Well, Jesus says finally, some of the seed falls on good ground. No weeds, plenty of topsoil, no rock, not hard surface. Some of those seeds fall on good ground. And, of course, they gain entry, they find nourishment, they grow up, and eventually you have a great harvest from that one small area of good growing seed. Well, great story, you know, we can relate to it. What does it really mean? Well, this parable is aimed at two different groups of people. It's aimed, first of all, at hearers of the Word, and second of all, at preachers of the Word. In the parable, what does the seed stand for?
Us.
People.
God.
Word of God. The Word of God. Seed stands for the Word of God. So we're talking about casting out the Word of God. And some of it falling on bad ground, some of it falling on rocky ground, some of it being choked out by thorns, and some of it falling on fertile ground and producing a harvest. So, first of all, the hearers of the Word, there's different ways of accepting the Word of God. And the fruit that the Word of God produces depends upon the heart of the person who accepts it. In other words, the fate of any spoken word depends upon the hearer. Okay? A joke, if you tell a joke, and you tell it to a person with no sense of humor, it's going to fall flat. But when you tell it to somebody who has a good sense of humor, they can be very amused. So, who are the hearers described and warned in the parable? Well, let's go back first of all and take a hard-beaten path. The seed that falls on hard, concrete, hard ground and never has a chance. We're talking here about hearers with a shut mind. These are people into whose minds the Word of God has no more chance of gaining entry than seed has a chance of germinating on concrete. And there are a number of things that can cause this to be that way. A person is prejudiced. Prejudice can make a person blind to anything that they do not want to see. You can put it right smack dab in front of their face. If they don't want to see it, they don't see it. Another is the what would be called the unteachable spirit. You put up a barrier which cannot be broken down. This can be the result of pride, maybe, which doesn't even know that it needs to hear the word. Or it can be the fear of a person in facing the truth and not wanting to hear the truth as spoken in the Word of God. Sometimes it can be an immoral character, and the resulting way of life that that person leads shuts their mind to be open to the will of God or the Word of God. You know, nobody is as blind as the person who deliberately doesn't want to see. And it happens in a person who refuses to listen to or recognize the truth which condemns them. So, in the parable, the seed that falls on hard ground, we're talking about the Word of God falling upon a shut mind of a person that doesn't want to hear, doesn't want to listen. Well, then we have the seed that falls on shallow ground, right? Only a couple of inches of topsoil. The seed takes root, begins to grow like crazy, and then all of a sudden, it dies. It gets scorched. This is the hearer with a mind like shallow ground, the person who fails to think things out and evaluate things. You know, some people are the kind of folks that are at the mercy of every new fad and every new craze that comes along. They'll jump on something that's the latest craze, and they'll be very enthusiastic about it, they'll get very emotional about it, but then after a short period of time they drop it just as fast and go on to something else. You know, probably know those kind of people. They feel the need to always be in fashion, but as soon as it becomes difficult, as soon as it becomes something you have to really commit yourself to, well, they forget it and they go looking for something else to hold on to. There are folks who live lives that are littered with things they started but never finished. None of us are like that, of course. They are people who get carried away emotionally. They get so enthusiastic, but they can't maintain anything permanently on that basis alone. So it also takes the mind. It takes some intelligence. Christianity is not just a privilege. Christianity is a big responsibility. It demands commitment over a long period of time. A sudden emotional burst of flame very quickly turns into a smoldering ember and then nothing but smoke. So that's the person who is represented by the shallow soil and the rocky ground underneath. Then we have the one about the weeds. This is a hearer who has so many interests and is going in so many different directions at once that really important things get crowded out. They're just constantly running, doing this, involved in that, doing this and that. And the really important things that should be taking place in their lives just never have a chance because they're getting crowded out by all this other stuff. Just like the weeds crowd out the good seed. A person gets too busy to worship, a person gets too busy to study God's Word, and other things choke it out, just like the thorns. This kind of a person might well intend to make time and have a genuine desire to study the Word of God and worship, but somehow they never quite get around to it. Their crowded lifestyles keep them from ever getting to it. Well, then finally there is the person who is like fertile ground. Shay mentioned this when she was the only one who would respond.
It's because she's wise now.
Oh, yeah.
We'll give her a gold star. Right up on her forehead.
But that means that I don't have to talk anymore until
Well, the person with a fertile mind is like fertile ground. First of all, their mind is open and they're willing to learn. Second of all, they are prepared to hear. And they're not too busy to sit down and listen. Third of all, they understand and have thought things through. They know what it means, and they're prepared to accept it. And finally, they translate what they hear into action. In other words, they end up producing good fruit from the seed, and lots of it. Okay? So that's how that parable fits with different kinds of folks right down the line. Now, I mentioned to you that there were two groups of people that Jesus was talking to. One were hearers of the word. The other are preachers of the word. The deeper meaning of this parable was directed at his inner circle of disciples. And it is meant specifically to address their discouragement. Jesus was everything, the wisest and the most wonderful of all. But humanly speaking, Jesus had very little success. Think about it. The doors of the synagogue were shut against him. The leaders of Orthodox religion were his bitterest critics and were obviously out to destroy him. True, crowds came to hear him, but there were so few who were really changed by it, and so many who came to reap the benefit of his healing power only, and then who, once they had received it, just took off and forgot about it. There were so many people who came to Jesus only for what they could get from Jesus. The disciples were faced with a situation in which Jesus seemed to rouse nothing but hostility, especially in the church leaders, and nothing but a very mild, lukewarm response from the crowds. It is nothing surprising if in the hearts of the disciples there was sometimes some deep disappointment. So what then does the parable say to the discouraged preacher? The harvest is sure. The bottom line is that even with all the difficulties, the result is abundant fruit. No matter the problems, the harvest does come. You can sow the seed with the confidence of knowing that the end result is going to be positive. Once you've sown the seed of the word, you may not know what you're doing. You may not know what effect the seed is having. You may not ever see the results. Doesn't make any difference. In the end, the harvest will be abundant. It's meant to encourage the disciples. HLG tells this story. Who is HLG? I haven't even the vaguest idea. But anyway, he tells this story.
Is that just initials? HLG?
HLG. No, G is the last name, G-E-E.
Okay.
In the church where he worshiped, there was a lonely old man. Everybody just called him Old Tom. He had outlived all of his friends, and hardly anybody knew who he was. And when Tom died, G had the feeling that there would be no one to go to the funeral, so he decided to go, so that there might be someone there to follow the old man to his last resting place. There was no one else, and it was a wild, wet day. The funeral reached the cemetery, and at the gate there was a soldier waiting. He was an officer, but on his raincoat there were no rank badges. Well, the soldier came to the graveside for the ceremony, and when it was over, he stepped forward and before the open grave swept his hand to a salute that might have been given to a king. HLG walked away with this soldier, and as they walked, the wind blew the soldier's raincoat open to reveal the shoulder badges of a brigadier general. The brigadier said to G, "You will perhaps be wondering what I'm doing here. Years ago, Tom was my Sunday school teacher. I was a wild lad and a sore trial to him. He never knew what he did for me, but I owe everything I am or will be to old Tom. And today I had to come to salute him at the end. Tom didn't know what he was doing. No preacher or teacher ever really does. It's our task to sow the seed and leave the rest to God. A seed can lay dormant until someday some experience, some event awakens the seed. We may live in an age demanding fast results, but God's Word must be sown with a great deal of patience and hope. We are assured that a great fruitful harvest will come at some point.
Even if we don't see it.
Even if
That's
we don't
the
see
story
it.
of old Tom, right?
Even if we don't see it. Okay, anybody want to make a comment about that parable?
I thought that it was great. I mean, I thought this, the.
You'd better say it was great, you're my wife.
Well, I think about the line about the harvest is assured. That's an important line that we overlook a lot.
Yeah, and you know, it's especially meant for people that are disappointed and discouraged. You know, you teach a Sunday school class, and a few years later the kids graduate from school, and one of them ends up in jail, and another one turns into a drug addict, and you think, you know, it was all a waste of time. But, you know, there's one or two. All the years that I was a principal at Boulder City High School, I did an awful lot of counseling with an awful lot of kids, and worked with a lot of kids with severe problems. And, you know, they graduate and they move on, and most of them you never see again. You know, they're gone out there. But every once in a while, you'd run into one of these kids in your daily routine somewhere. And they come running up to you, "Oh, Mr. Fox, Mr. Fox." They throw their arms around you and they say, "Do you remember when I was in so-and-so and such and such? You helped me so much." You know, you only have to hear that a couple of times to know that you made a difference somewhere. And it's the same kind of thing with the Word of God.
You know, I think that's true in any vocation or whatever you do for a living. I think that's true. That you touch people that you never know you touched. Because I don't think it just is in the fields like in teaching and preaching and things like that. I think everyone has touched someone and may never know.
Oh, we've had stories at our class before about people who completely changed the lives of other people. They just ran into them at the train station.
Yeah.
And only interacted with this person for 5 minutes, and it changed this person's whole life.
Sometimes you just never know.
I mean, that kind of thing, you know, it happens. Okay. The next parable. You want me to save it for next week? I don't know, I was going to start, but I guess I better wait.
It's awful early though, honey.
Well, these guys have to leave at 10:30 anyway. Huh?
Well, will it be on the quiz if we leave?
Spoken like a true professor.
I'm going to go ahead and start, and then we'll pick it up next week where we leave it off. This parable comes from Luke 16, 1 through 13. It's called A Bad Man's Good Example. It's a parable you probably haven't heard too much of. It's a parable that you may not have ever heard, and it's a parable which once you've read it, you don't understand what it's all about. And there's a reason. You'll never hear this parable in a sermon. At least I never have. And that's one of the reasons why. It's a story about a set of unscrupulous bunch of rascals that you could find anywhere. And all I'm going to do is read the parable. You think about what this means during the week so that when you come back next week, I don't have to give the lesson. You can tell me what this parable means, right?
Sally and I will be in charge. Okay?
That's right.
Okay, here's what it is. Jesus says, there was a rich man whose manager was accused of wasting his possessions. So he called him in and asked him, "What is this I hear about you? Give an account of your management, because You cannot be manager any longer. The manager said to himself, oh, what should I do now? My master is taking away my job. I'm not strong enough to dig, and I'm ashamed to beg. I know what I'll do so that when I lose my job here, people will welcome me into their houses. So he called in each one of his master's debtors. He asked the first, how much do you owe my master? 800 gallons of olive oil, he replied. The manager told him, take your bill, sit down quickly, and make it 400. Then he asked the second one, how much do you owe? 1,000 bushels of wheat, he replied. He told him, take your bill and make it 800. Well, the master commended the dishonest manager because he had acted very shrewdly. In other words, the owner liked the conniving that was going on. He thought it was really slick. For the people of this world are more shrewd in dealing with their own kind than are the people of the light. I tell you, use worldly wealth to gain friends for yourselves, so that when it is gone, you will be welcomed into eternal dwellings. Whoever can be trusted with very little can also be trusted with much. And whoever is dishonest with very little will also be dishonest with much. So if you have not been trustworthy in handling worldly wealth, who will trust you with true riches? And if you have not been trustworthy with someone else's property, who will give you property of your own? No servant can serve two masters. Either he will hate the one and love the other, or he will be devoted to the one and despise the other. You cannot serve both God and money.
Maybe just a little money?
No.
Thank you.
So in that, thanks guys.
I'll be
So
there
in
to
that
do the
parable,
altar, Kay.
There's the manager of the property is a scoundrel. Okay? And the debtors are scoundrels. And the master is a scoundrel. They're all scoundrels. They're all conniving with each other. And what happens is, you see, the manager says, I go to all these guys that owe my master a lot. Okay? And he tells them, only pay this much. I'll tell the master you only owe this much, not this much. What does he gain by doing that?
Their goodwill.
They all love him. He's letting them out of a big debt. But at the same time, the manager can turn around and blackmail all those guys. Right?
That's true.
Skullduggery.
I think part of that where it says you can only serve, well, I think that has to be, in my opinion, that you either serve God or you serve the world. You know, serve whatever you love in the world.
Well, you know, if your primary point in life is to acquire money and wealth, then there's not going to be much room for
God. No, that's what I mean. I can't.
If your primary point in life is to serve God, then money becomes less important. You know, so can't.
I think
And
it's
the
to
love of
serve
money,
God or
the love
serve
of money,
yourself.
I think becomes important.
Pardon?
I think it's to serve God or serve yourself.
Yes.
Those are your choices.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah.
So you're not going to go on?
No.
No, I don't want to go any further because these guys will miss this for next week.
It'll be on the website.
Well, no, I think I'll wait.
Well, you had to go.
Okay. Yeah.
I don't want to cheat these guys out of it either.
Thank you, Brian.
Okay. Thank you.